Alright, welcome back to Wildcard Workshop. Now for once, we're going to be covering something a little more visual, so let me show you that real quick. Yep, that's right. We're covering materials this time. Now, I want to be very clear. I'm not an artist. I did make that material, but I'm not an artist. Okay, that took me a while to figure out. And I don't necessarily understand some of the math that went there. Some of those bits I stumbled across by accident. Was like, oh, that's cool. That'll happen a lot when you're working with materials, so just keep that in mind as we're going through this. There's going to be parts that I'm sure you want an explanation for why that thing happens like that. I don't necessarily do, but that's not the focus of this video. We're going to cover kind of some general information on materials. And then in the next video, we're going to cover handling dynamic materials in our blueprint graphs. Okay, so that we can get some functionality in place like that transition in and out. But let's be very clear, I am not an artist. I am better with logic. Materials are a lot of math. A lot of math. We'll go check it out. All right, let's go. All right. So before we actually move over to the dev kit, I want to show you a tool that I used to sort of make one of the textures. This is a little program called Spacescape. It's basically I don't know if you've ever seen those fractal generators. It's kind of like that. You can use something like this to create one. I just used one of the defaults for now while I was sort of blocking out this material. But I may come back later and make one that, make a custom one. But this is how I made the cube map material, because as you can see, it's just a full three-dimensional image. But that'll allow us to, when you export from here, you'll want to do export skybox single DDS cube map. And that's how you want to export it, okay? Now, once you have that, and you can import it into the kit using this import button, you'll get a texture that we can use. And as you can see, it's just kind of this one big, long texture, and things are kind of stretched at the top and bottom. That's normal. As for settings, I turned off sRGB. Now, these are just the settings that seem to look best as I was playing with this texture. I set it to the editor icon for compression, mipmap, or mipgen settings, no mipmaps, and LOD group skybox. Okay. So now, here's the deal, okay? We're going to be looking at the material. Now, as you can see looking at it, it looks a little odd. There's a reason for that. That's just sort of the, one of the values was set at a default that's kind of halfway between two states. So let's start with the standard material. Ignore this for now. Let's just put it on a sphere. Okay. Let's start previewing here. This is the normal material. I'll explain what this is doing up here for a moment, or after we go through the base material. What we've got is, if we look at the material here itself, you can see this sphere. As I turn it, it looks like there's space inside of the sphere, okay? This is a sort of a reflection skybox material that we're using right here, okay? Now, the way I did this is with this reflection vector, okay? I gave it, we can adjust sort of the vector, the angle that it's appearing to look at with this world's vector parameter. For instance, if I open this up and just kind of move it around. Oops. Get back up. Gotta actually give it up here. And then if we say, see, it makes everything look a little bit different. It's just kind of the vector. You know, with this one particular vector, everything looks kind of stretched and different. And that's just kind of how that works. So you can play around with settings like that and make it look the way that you want. Now, from this reflection vector, we're going to use it as the UVs for a skybox texture. Now, to do this particular parameter, you would right-click, type in texture. We're looking for texture sample parameter cube, okay? And that'll give us that. So you get that param cube. In there, you want to set the texture to your skybox material. You want to make sure sampler type is set to linear color. And that'll be it for that. Now we can multiply it by a scalar parameter to kind of adjust the brightness of it. Now, to understand kind of what's going on here, if you're not familiar with materials, okay, they don't work the same as your standard blueprint graphs. Like, you can navigate them and add to them the same ways, but I'm talking about the way that they operate under the hood. See, your standard blueprint graphs operate mostly by logic, okay? If, and, or else, while operating on concepts of Boolean logic in deciding instructions on what to do. Now, with material graphs and shaders, it's a little bit different. They don't focus so much on logic. In fact, logic is bad here. Logic is expensive. Materials work pretty much exclusively on math. Okay? So take a texture, okay, and then imagine that every pixel in it is actually a struct of 4 values. A red value from 0 to 255, a green value, a blue value, and an alpha, okay? But for every pixel, all right, that's important to understand. So if we assume all of these pixels and their values, and we multiply every single pixel individually by a particular value, like 2, suddenly they all have double all of the values in the pixel. So the image as a whole becomes uniformly brighter. That's how materials work. It's all math. Okay, now it's either math on individual pixels or vertices, depending on what you're doing. But for the most part, you're going to be working with, when you're working with textures, it's going to be pixels that you're operating on. When you're working with geometry, like world position offsets or tessellation, it's going to be vertices. Okay, so let's continue on with this. Debugging materials is a little bit different. You can't really put down a breakpoint to kind of show what's going on, but luckily materials have a nice little function. Like, as you saw when I clicked over here and hit start previewing node, that will show up here. So this is how we can debug. So for instance, if I go to start previewing node, we can see, oh, hey, that's what the material looks like at this point. Okay, so it'll only calculate up to the node that you're previewing. If I go over here, we'll see that. And then I can increase the value of that to make it brighter or darker and kind of preview how it operates. So this is how you'll easily be able to test things. Then we do a subtract. Now, subtract is, again, it's doing it on a per pixel basis, but basically this is sort of giving a clip on the values. As you can see, it just kind of makes the darks a bit darker and everything just kind of stand out a little bit more. From there, this goes right into our emissive color. That's kind of the thing, is that the way this works, The particular way that it does is because it's on emissive, so even if it's night, the surrounding environment is dark, it'll still display. What I kind of envisioned for this material was that it'd be kind of like a void material, so looking at it looks like you're looking into a void. But I also wanted it to look crystalline. You'll kind of see what I'm talking about if I go back over to this one. See how you can see the individual polygons? If we were to, for instance, unhook the normals from here, you'd see that's smooth. Okay, same with the sphere. Well, the same is very true of our creatures. They have smooth normals, so we can't see the polygon edges very well. Now, as you can see right in front of us, I've got a little section here for handling that, because I do want to see the individual polys. Now, don't ask me exactly what DDX and DDY are, okay? This particular little section of graph was something that I found online when I was looking how to do this, because otherwise it'd look weird with the smooth, plasticky looking normals of creatures. This is the one that I found that did exactly what I wanted, which was make anything that this material is attached to look like a low poly model. Now, from there, if we want it to look like crystal, it needs a bit of a shine, and it needs a specular value and things like that. So the actual base color of the material is actually just black. Okay? There's no actual color being attached to the standard texture here. I've got metallic and specular set to 0.5, and that gives it sort of that shine, that polished surface look right there. And then roughness at 0 again to give it sort of that reflectiveness and just kind of add to that. With all of that together, this is the material we get. Okay, now just to kind of show you a little bit on what this one looked like. This little section here, this is what it does. These are the normals that are generated by this. Okay, and this basically finds the edges of all the polygons and then makes it so that they pop out like that. Okay, so that was the base material. Okay, this is the one that doesn't change. This is not the transition material itself. All of that is up here. Now, to explain why they're separated like this, this material is handled by a switch parameter. Okay, and you're probably saying, but you just said logic is bad. It is. But the thing about switches and bools in materials is that they're not dynamic. Okay? You can't change the value of them during the game's runtime. These are basically when you create a material instance and you change a value on a bool or a switch, it evaluates it and pre-compiles it. So right now, if I were to turn this off, okay, in the material instance, okay, not this particular one, it doesn't really matter here, but in the material instance itself, if I were to turn that off, only this section is going to get compiled into that material. If I turn it on, only everything hooked up to this line here. Okay, so that's sort of where it goes, is it only goes by what is connected. Okay, so it'll go backwards, find everything connected, and compile only that into the material. So with this one, it kind of goes back and it compiles the entire graph because of the way that it's hooked up. But with it off, it only compiles this section. I just used two make material attributes here to sort of split them off. Now, I could have made this two separate master materials. I wanted to kind of show how we can make some composite materials like this. There's other ways to do it. You can, actually, I don't think we have layered materials in the same sense as newer UE4 versions. in the ArcDev kit, but there are ways to do it. You can do blending and things like that as well. Now, let's go ahead and move on to the transition material. Everything that's down here is also part of the transition material, okay? But the way that it gets merged in is for emissive, they get added. So anything done to emissive in this section is added to this. For let's see, which one is it? Oh, nope, I think that was it. Everything else just goes directly into the material attributes. Okay, so that was the only thing blended in this particular material, but that's a way to do it. If you were doing, say, an opacity mask in both sections, you'd want to multiply them. And the reason for that is because an opacity mask is basically a black and white value between 0 and 1. And basically, you want to make sure that it operates on... Basically, you want to say, hey, keep your blacks, okay? Because 0 would be black. If you want to add two opacity masks together, basically, you want to multiply them so that anything times 0 stays 0. White areas multiplied with white areas will stay white. White multiplied with black will stay black. Black multiplied with black will stay black. And that kind of creates sort of a composite opacity mask. Depending on what areas you're trying to merge in your material attributes, kind of decides the way that you do it. So you might want to do research on that. And that's research. Lots and lots of research, lots and lots of practice go into materials. It is a very much a practiced skill. So let's start here. Let's go with the spiral offsets first, okay? Now, as I said before, I am not an artist. I am definitely not an artist. Some of this was sort of put together from other tutorials that I found that kind of gave me pieces that I wanted. But let's go ahead and look at this, okay? So just to kind of give a bit of a sense here. If we look at this absolute world position node, and we start previewing it, we see that it kind of bisects it. Well, it doesn't bisect it. It just dissects the entire thing into 8 quadrants. But those quadrants are sort of color-coded. And the way they're color-coded is actually by their channel. Your red, your green, your blue. You can see where they overlap. Okay. Now, in this particular material, I want to go by the x-axis. Okay. So the way that worked out, but here's the thing. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. This particular node that we're previewing right now is the world position. Okay. That's not quite what we want, because that means that as the object is moving around in world space, the material is going to change. The position is going to change. And then basically the material is going to look like it's moving in a way that's not, like it's moving across the surface of the creature. And that's not what we want. So we need to convert it to local space, and that's what this node does. Okay, so we convert world to local. So now this will stay in sync with the creature as the creature moves. Okay. Now, we wanted the x-axis for this, okay? So basically this transition is going to operate on the x-axis for how it's going to move. And the way that worked out was with the blue channel. So we take the blue channel. Start previewing that. That will kind of show us. So you can see it. It just cuts it in half like that. Okay. Now, if we add time multiplied, the 42 is just a random number. It was actually used in the tutorial that I was following along for some of this. But you can see it just makes everything kind of bright. That's fine. Those are just numbers being previewed around. Around this point, it's kind of difficult to see what's going on. But these are mostly just like fall-offs and adjustment values right here. But here's where things start to get interesting. This sine and cosine. If you remember anything from your math classes, when you take a sine and a cosine together like this, it basically kind of makes a sphere pattern kind of thing. Time makes it kind of rotate. So from here, if we start previewing, we get this. So the time is making it go up and down, okay? It's creating that thing where it goes down vertically or up depending on the direction. But if we take and multiply it by the object radius divided by the spiral, random, well, not random, but a chosen parameter, just a certain value, it kind of looks the same until we give it sort of, I can't remember exactly what this node did, but it basically kind of adjusted it so that it's a little bit different. As you can see, we've got some angles showing up here. Now again, please remember, I'm not an artist. I don't understand every node and every part of what this graph is doing. Some of it I stumbled upon, some of it I was following tutorials, some of it was just kind of put together from old materials. That's not what this is about. I'm going through these sections and trying to show you how to observe what the different sections of your materials are doing and how to debug them and get them to kind of do what you want. It's all math. So if you're good with math, you're probably going to be able to do stuff like this a lot quicker than I was. Okay, this took me a while. If it takes you a while too, don't be discouraged by that. As you can see by the final material that I showed you, you can do some pretty cool stuff even with really limited knowledge, okay? So while we're still down here, now there was a couple values that I shared up here. First being, this was kind of shared with it, but let's see, we're back to that, getting that world local position on the x-axis, and then we are adding that, right? Oh yeah, this is for the world position offset. That's what this section is for, okay? And this will make more sense in just a moment. Maybe, I don't know. So we've got the object radius, we're adding it to a general offset. This is just a chosen number, we can adjust that. I've made it a parameter, just so that we can play with it in the material instances. Multiplying it by -1, and then we have a lerp here. Now this, if we change it, it doesn't look like anything's changed at this point, but you will see it. Oh, right, we're not previewing a part where it matters, huh? That has an effect. Let's see here. As you can see, we've got that. Hold on. Well, it helps if I haven't gone way out of range. So, there we go. All right, so what this scalar is doing is it's changing the alpha on this lerp. So this lerp is going between two values. One where the sphere, the object, is basically all white, and the other being that it's all black. So if we move closer towards that 0 value, it becomes all white. If we move closer to the 1, it becomes all black. Little by little. Now this we may do some adjustment on for the fall offs and stuff, but we're not worrying about that right now. So that's how we've kind of gotten to this point where we can slowly transition between these two states, or quickly, depending on how we want to. So let's go up here to the divide. This kind of softens by the offset, and then we clamp it. Now this basically just does saturate. This just makes sure that anything over 1 is clamped back down to a value of 1. Anything under 0 is just clamped back to a value of 0. So all of the values will stay between those. And sometimes that's really important for making sure that we don't have any unexpected bleed overs and emissives and things like that. So now we're going to multiply that sort of mask black and white mask that we had along with our spiraling effect, okay? And that's how we get this. All right. Now, if I come back over to this visibility control, you can see it kind of do that. Now, what this is, okay, is we have basically kind of created a mask on our world position offsets. So what this is going to do is this is basically going to deform the mesh, okay? That's the objective. We want it to deform the mesh. That gives us our world position offset. Now we can kind of see it a little bit better. So that's where this spiraling is coming from. That's what the deformation of the mesh that's making it spread out here. So let's grab this again. We're going to bring that down. There we go. That's basically what it's doing to the mesh, is it's taking it, stretching it out, and causing it to spiral and spin out like this. Just like that. Okay? Oops. Now, we've also got the emissive color, which we've taken that that mask, sort of the part that's saying, hey, what part is going to be spiraling? And we're taking that same value calculation right here and multiplying that with some emissive colors. Now, this looks white, I know, but if you open up this and you look at the values, the way it's set up is that 1 is a full value here, okay? So anything above 1 is oversaturation. Keep that in mind. Anything above 1 is oversaturation. So what we've done is we've kind of created a green material, but it's so oversaturated that the center just looks like 1, and that gives it a nice, really like white hot glow effect. You can adjust that if you want to so that it's not quite so bright. We might do that. If they're all the same, it obviously becomes white, but if we adjust the other ones down like this, suddenly, there we go. Now the center looks a bit more green. If we were to go to like 0.5, 0.5, and 1, now it's just kind of green. Now it's emissive still, but it doesn't have that glow, that bloom effect anymore. So it kind of loses kind of the impact of it. The 50 here kind of felt pretty good to me. We might lower it a bit in the future, but we'll play around with it. But as you can see, that gives like a nice bright glow. It looks kind of like the old like laser colors. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. Anywho. Now, I also wanted to give this a little bit of polish. So you can't really see it on this material, but I will show you in a moment. This is for an opacity mask. And this is kind of to show we've got a range where things are invisible. We've got a range where things are fully in the standard material, this one down here. And then between that is our emissive color, okay? This green. So for the opacity mask, what I did was, again, we get that x-axis. We want it to be in line with the other ones, but it's offset so that we can kind of control the margin for how big this effect is. Now, that's what all of this is doing right here. Now, this makes it all white, though. Okay, which is not what we want, because we're creating the opacity mask, which means we want it to be black, so we want to declare the area that's going to be invisible. So this bit from our local world position and all that gives us an entirely white area. Now we can clamp it. So it's just standard white. and then we do a 1 minus x, which basically inverts it, okay? And then we can multiply by 2, and that'll give us sort of this little area. I believe that's actually... Hey, I can't remember what that value was for. And we subtract it from absolute world position, divide by 10, and then frac. Now, a frac is like a fractalized, or fractional, not fractalized, fractional. And what that does, it looks really crazy right now. This fractional node basically takes it so that if you've got a bunch of things that are values 0 to 100 or whatever, it'll cut them up into sections so that it's like values of 21 to 30 are now 0 to 10, or 20 to 30 are 0 to 10, and 30 to 40 are 0 to 10 now, and 40 to 50 are 0 to 10. So it's basically like it rolls over at a constant rate, okay? So it creates sort of this uniform map for positional data. Now, the reason that we're having it do this is, let me see if I can find a good display of it right here. This is creating sort of a spherical pattern in all of those grid points. Basically, we're going to use this pattern to create a neat little, like, particle-ish looking effect to it, to make it kind of like it's spawning in dots. Now, a little bit difficult to show in this material, but luckily, we have material instances. So let's pop on over here. Okay, so this is a material instance. If you don't know how to make material instances, once you've made your master material, right-click, create material instance. Okay, we have made 2 for the mod right now. One that's just Sentry Matte, which is the one with the transition effect, and then Sentry Matte Solid, which is the one without, and that is determined down here in the static switch parameter. Okay, so this one is for the virtualized material, and Sentry Matte Solid is not the transition material. But again, you can see this is how the solid material looks. So when applied to a creature, just to kind of give you an idea, we go down here to say the raptor. It's easier to show it on something that I know only has one material slot at the moment in this display. So yeah, now you can kind of see we do have sort of that, like we're looking through a window kind of thing, but then you can also see it kind of looks like it's made of crystal, doesn't it? It's got that low poly effect, and then it looks like it's made of crystal because light will reflect off of it like that, and it looks like it's been polished and cut. Now, if we go back to the transition material, we can't really see anything. And the reason is because I have it currently instantiated our vanish control parameter, which if you remember from here, is down here. It's the one controlling this lerp. If I go like this, see that? Now, remember that dot grid that I was showing you. Watch closely as I bring it down maybe to about, yeah, there. Now you can kind of see it. See those dots as they're showing? That's what that fractional node was doing, was it was helping to create that effect. So now we've got this slider that as we move it, it spawns our creature in. And we can do it at just about any rate we want. If I'm holding here, the real time won't show up, so it holds still. But even when it's at a single position, the entire thing continues to rotate. So it's a nice little effect that we can control the speed at which we do this transition. That actually gives us an opportunity to handle maybe an augment for our towers down the road, something that to spawn things in faster. We'll explore that a bit later on. But look at that. Isn't that a nice little transition effect? Just like that. Just spirals in and then out. And then in and then out. And it kind of breathes life into that virtual creature concept. Okay, and since we're spawning them from crystals, giving them kind of a crystalline look, and then kind of like you're looking into a void inside of it, I think it fits together well. But you can do this any way that you want. You don't even need to use a custom material on these guys. Well, I mean, if you want the transition effect, you have to. That's not something baked into their regular materials. But since we're going to basically use the same material on all of our creatures in my vision of this mod, this works out well. And there we have it. I hope from this that you enjoyed it. Now, again, this will be in the Git repo, but in case you're watching the video along, I know I might have zoomed over specific portions of this graph pretty quickly, and it may not make a whole lot of sense, and I'm skipping around. Please download it from the repo if you want to look at all of the nodes. Otherwise, we'll be sitting here for about 5 minutes as I slowly pan over all of it. We don't really want that. And we could probably parameterize more of this and give ourselves a bit more control over how it functions. But for now, this is what I want. So we've got our transition slider here. Now we can, as I mentioned before, we also got those fall offs too. So for instance, some of the parameters that I've got the spiral distance. Now this is maybe poorly named because it's actually sort of the opposite. The bigger the number, the smaller the distance of that spiral. The smaller the number, the bigger the spiral is. So I might rename these a bit. We can make it pretty crazy. So we got that, and then it's like it wisps out and in. Look at that. I'm pretty proud of this material. This might be one of the cooler ones that I've put together. Again, it's not entirely of my own design. I did kind of piece it together from some other tutorials, including ones on, significantly from one that was on the Unreal Engine YouTube channel. So, you definitely go out there and check. They have like their own podcasts and video tutorials and things where guests come on and show how to do different stuff. This dude did some pretty cool, he did a pretty cool effect that was very much like this. I did have to rework it a little bit because of nodes that don't exist in our version of UE4. He was building it in a later version, but for the most part, it is pretty significantly built off of it for the transition effect itself. And we've got our fall offs, and the way this fall off works is if I reduce it enough, you can see that margin shrinks right until we get down to 0, in which case there's no room left for that transition material. So this fall off decides how much room we have for that transition effect. So I've got it set to 200. I like 200. I like the spiral distance being at 1, at least for now. And then from there, we get a pretty good transition to where from the dot effect and then into that more solid glow until it finally solidifies. And there we go. So I hope everyone enjoyed this one. I had quite a bit of fun making it. So now you've kind of seen how to make the material, okay? Or how to work with materials in general. Again, most of it's going to come down to research. You're going to want to do things and not know how to do them maybe right off the bat. And you're going to want to kind of do some research on how to break it down into little pieces and then combine all the pieces that you need together to get the final effect that you want. Art takes time and practice. Let's face it. It takes a lot of time and practice to really make things good. But we can get some pretty cool effects without having to fully understand all of the pieces that make it up, just thanks to the wealth of knowledge online. So please take advantage of all of the information on UE4 materials that are available online, because for the most part, that system is unchanged. I mean, there's some new nodes in later versions of UE4 that are available, but for the most part, pretty much anything that can be done with those nodes can still be done in earlier versions. It's just that it takes more nodes. They're not put together into pre-configured material functions. So you got to kind of figure out what goes into them. For instance, you saw we used the world space and then another node, or we used the world space coordinates node, and then another node to transmit it or to transform it into local space coordinates. In later versions of UE4, there's just a local space node. But under the hood, it's basically doing that same thing that we did in this video. A lot of us can be figuring stuff out like that. Now, there might be stuff in later versions of UE4 that just aren't possible in the ArcDev kit. Those should be far and few in between. Most of them are like systems features. In the next video, we're going to be actually hooking this material up into a buff. And that buff is going to control all of the transition events and making sure that the creature is appearing and disappearing when we want it to. And then that same buff is also going to be sort of a staging point for whenever we need to keep control or track of something with the creature, because we're not remapping the creatures. So that'll be the next video. Until then, happy modding.